The Houris in Islamic tradition are basically supernatural women created for the express purpose of sexual gratification of Allah's minions once they die and they reach that level of paradise. Now, this is interesting because in the Muslim sources, again in Al-Makari especially, when Tariq saw the Christian army approaching, he rallied his men around him and exhorted them with very typical jihadist phraseology. He said, "Where can you fly now?" Remember, he burned their boats. "The enemy is in your front and the sea at your back. By Allah, there is no salvation for you but in courage and perseverance." Okay? And as usual, I kind of alluded to this earlier when they first sent their reconnaissance force to see what's going on in Spain, and they came back with reports of all these wonders. As usual, there were carnal incentives also lurked beneath Tariq's pious talk. In fact, he managed to fuse the seizure of those two most enticing rewards promised to Muslim men, untold riches and beautiful women, as well as invoke the stereotype of eager to be ravished European women. And he did it all in one sentence. What I'm talking about is, until now, the idea amongst Muslims who go around raping women in Europe, if you don't know this, is, and I've written a lot about this, there's copious documentation of Muslims basically saying, you white women want it. We know you're good at it. You like it. Okay. And so this comes out here in the year 711 at the mouth of Mr. Tariq. So here's the one succinct sentence where he wraps in all the boons of Islam. He says, quote, "You must have heard numerous accounts of this place. You must know how the Grecian maidens, as beautiful as Houris," the Houris in Islamic tradition are basically supernatural women created for the express purpose of sexual gratification of Allah's minions once they die and they reach that level of paradise because they've earned it through, let's say, martyrdom. Okay, so he continues, "You must know how the Grecian maidens, as beautiful as Houris, their necks glittering with innumerable pearls and jewels, their bodies clothed with tunics of costly silks, sprinkled with gold. You must have heard how they are awaiting your arrival, reclining on soft couches in the sumptuous palaces of crowned lords and princes." So, here at the battlefield, Tariq, in classic Islamic fashion, is trying to rile the men to face the oncoming Visigoths in battle, and he's trying to entice them by saying, look, there's all these beautiful women who are, even their clothes is rich, and they're in these beautiful, sumptuous palaces waiting for you. But covering all bases, Tariq also invoked Allah's win-win bargain. I've coined this a long time ago. Allah's win-win bargain is that basically, look, the first one is, okay, you go on jihad, you conquer, you enslave, you get women, you get property, you plunder, so you win. And if you die, well, you go to the highest levels of paradise and you get the same sorts of things. Very carnal paradise. Sex with the Houris. It's portrayed as a very carnal food, drinking wine, rivers of wine and honey, pretty boys circulate as pearls and whatnot. Okay. So this is Allah's win-win bargain, which secular people don't have. So before Allah came around, the Arabs and all the other subsequent people who converted to Islam didn't have this. Okay, you had the first one. If you kill the other tribe, if you beat them and you conquer them, you can take their women, take their land, plunder them. You didn't have the whole business of, whoa, but if it goes awry and I die, well, I even get more of it in heaven. So that was the genius of Muhammad, I suppose. Anyway, so the win-win that he gave Tariq is that he said, after rushing, quote, after rushing on like so many brave men to the fight, he said, any Muslim who dies in battle, quote, know that the recompenses of Allah await you in paradise, which is what I was referring to. Hence the win-win. Now, what actually happened at this battle? The records are very sketchy, somewhat contradictory. There's not a whole lot of them because it's an old battle. We're talking the year 711. But what it appears, there were some sorts of divisions among the nobles. There was possible betrayals. Maybe one or more of the factions abandoned Roderick in the midst of the battle. At any rate, the Muslims won. And, quote, Allah killed Roderick and those with him, says the 9th century Arab historian Al-Hakam. a premier source for the conquest of North Africa and into Spain. And quote, he opened the way for the Muslims, and never was there in the West a more bloody battle than this. For the Muslims did not withdraw their scimitars from them, from the Christians, for 3 days. So it was a complete butchery at this battle, whatever happened. And the Muslims just slaughtered them for 3 days with scimitars, hacking away at them. And then Makari writes, quote, meanwhile, Allah filled with terror, there we go again, and alarm the hearts of the mushrikeen, meaning the polytheists or the Christians in this case, because to Muslims, Christians who believe in the Trinity, Holy Spirit, Christ, Son, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, are polytheists, mushrikeen. That's one of the worst categories in Islam, just like a kafir. So Allah filled with terror and alarm the hearts of the mushrikeen, meaning the Christians, and their consternation was greatly increased when they saw Tariq penetrate far into their country. Okay, so after this battle, essentially, oftentimes it seems like all resistance collapsed, but it didn't. It got, of course, weaker because the king had just died. And now Tariq and all his Muslim men are roaming through the Iberian Peninsula. And they beat again some of the remnants of the army at another battle. And then at that point, it was like a cycle. So the more they won, the more carcasses the more carcasses draw vultures, the more victories caused Muslims from North Africa to start to travel to Spain and join their brethren on this winning jihad. So Makari writes, quote, when the people on the other side of the straits in Africa heard of the success of Tariq and of the plentiful spoils he had acquired, they flocked to him from all quarters and crossed the sea on every vessel or bark they could lay hold of. Not unlike if you're paying attention to what happens in Spain right now and the migrants who come from North Africa, that's often how they're described, as just crossing the sea on every vessel or bark they could lay hold of. The quote continues, Tariq's army being so considerably reinforced, the Christians were obliged to shut themselves up in their castles and fortresses and, quitting the flat country, betake themselves to the mountains. And so it went. That's basically the summary and the capitulation and collapse of Spain. Tariq and his men continued to penetrate further northward into Spain, quote, not passing a place without reducing it and getting possession of its wealth. Notice, it's not just conquering, it's always getting possession of its wealth, its humans, its women. For Allah Almighty, Makari continues, had struck with terror the hearts of the infidels. See, once again, according to this 16th century Muslim historian, this was being done in keeping with the commandments of the Quran to strike terror into the hearts of the infidels.